Hotel, Dangerous Person 2.0 English Channel.
歡迎大家嚟到危險人物2.0英文廣播。Thank you for watching Dangerous Persons 2.0 the English broadcast. And we have here two very nice gentlemen. Of course, my husband Sean Hutong and Norman McKillop. So, Sean, I realized Norman was in your broadcast for 9 episodes.
Yes.
And every time there's one thing that comes out really peculiar, is how you pronounce his name. Did you realize that he doesn't pronounce your name correctly?
Yes, I did, but that's not uncommon.
Well, but do you know why?
No.
And you actually, we are going to make a funny episode of every time when you are expecting him or anticipating him to introduce you, you're actually looking at him with a little anxiety. How is he going to call you this time? I noticed that. And can you tell everybody why?
Yeah, well, as a kid, I was dyslexic, and I still mispronounce words. So when I went to the States, well, actually, it's from reading Chinese. So I'm going, I'm going right to left and, top to bottom, whereas English is the opposite direction. So, as a youth, I would read the Ladybug books, and, one page is a picture.
Ladybirds.
Yeah, the ladybirds.
Yeah.
Ladybirds. Yeah, the ladybirds. So it's a picture with a little reading. So, not very intense. It's more of a picture through the history, which are great books. Really.
So anyway, go back to the issue.
Oh, so
How do you call him?
well, if I focus, it's Chief Inspector McKillop. Okay. However, I've been saying McKillop when I just say it.
What else have he been saying? You noticed?
Maybe McKillop. So, but anyway, during the episodes, you will see me saying it, and you'll see Norman look at me like, "What the hell is wrong with this guy?" So Mary came up with the idea that she's going to go through all my films and find these mispronunciations, so she can have a video making fun of me. In essence.
Well,
Yeah.
Norman is asking me, why are we doing this interview today? And obviously it's not about your reading problems. It's actually a lot of people love you. After the episodes comes out, yes, they do. And they respect you, and you really give them a very good idea how policemen in the 70s they work.
Oh, okay, that's something positive.
Yeah, very positive. So, and a lot of people ask me 2 questions in particular. Can Norman speak Chinese?
可以啊，
你講到中文㗎係嘛？
講得。
講得你全部你聽幾多可以？
提下我多過日本，
多過一半。
多過日。
但係你老婆係中國人嚟㗎嘛？
我老婆係中國人，因為佢唔係澳門人，佢唔係本地人。
哦。佢唔係澳門人，但係佢係中國人，識講中文嘅。識講中文。
講普通話。
講普通話嘅。
佢就識講本地話。
本地話即係廣東話都識講話。誒過嚟啊！
梗係一個。
梗係得過你啦。
我個女佢係澳門出世，佢識講普通話、廣東話，識講英文啊，因為佢自己讀意大利話。
哦，讀意大利文。
讀意大利文。
所以幾叻啊！你話咁 OK，咁啊呢個第一個問題啦。第二個問題咧，佢哋問點解你嗰陣時要嚟香港做警察，你唔留喺英國做警察咧 ？OK， 你知道我講咩？Can you ask again in English?
So basically, why did you come to Hong Kong and become a police officer? So
instead of
remaining
in England.
Instead of remaining in England, but so actually, a lot of people want to know about your youth and your life's path.
Oh.
So you should probably keep this in English so we get it all.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
So the first question, I guess, is did you graduate from college I know you got a master's and you're a barrister, but as a teenager.
當時我係16歲我離開蘇格蘭，我係蘇格蘭出世。我有3個大佬，2個細佬，細佬1個細妹。又話我哋唔係好 大把錢，
Okay.
唔係窮啊，所以
Middle class?
唔係 middle class。
Oh, okay.
我老豆佢行孫啊，所以我好少見佢。So 我自己決定係我想全世界我有興趣去睇下。所以我離開蘇格蘭我自己。當時我16歲，好後生。我搭飛機去美國。
去美國啊？
去美國，第一次行船。當時我that ship is in Tacoma, Washington. So no mother, no father, but the ship captain is legally my father at that time. So I stayed on these ships for 5-6 years.
No wonder you know everything about ship when you broke the case
Yes.
of Jenny.
So when I came back to 我翻嚟蘇格蘭讀埋翻學嘅nautical college we call it.
Nautical college is it
For to learn how to
船
do for the 船長and the second mate.
航海學校？
當時I'm third mate. Number 3. So now I want to be number 2. So I know我要讀多啲啊。So 嗰間學校隔離有Glasgow 個城市啊，Glasgow 嘅headquarter 警察總部啊。所以我覺得我有興趣做差佬。所以我去睇下。And I just want to get some information. So I went inside to the headquarters, and one person said, "Oh, we come. What's the matter?" I said, "I want to get some information." "Oh, follow me." So he took me to a big office, and inside is the very senior police officer. And he promised me he can get me into the police force within 3 months. So I thought, that's kind of strange. So because I'm in Asia most of the time, from 16 to 21 years old, in Japan, in Hong Kong, and Taiwan, and all around Asia, Philippines, Indonesia. And the ship's crew is Chinese. So I'm very comfortable with Asian people. And after 5 years in Asia, because I only come back to Scotland maybe once a year or once every 2 years, because the ship never goes back to Scotland. We're always outside. So I'm more or less these 5 years in Asia. So I have a very good friend on the ship. He's like my mentor. He's Chinese. And he knows我有興趣做警察. So he said, why don't come to Hong Kong and join the Hong Kong police? I didn't know I can join the Hong Kong police. So I said,點得啊? How? He said, I don't know. But so I wrote a letter. At that time, there's no internet. So the only way to communicate is just by letter. So I wrote a letter directly to the chief of police, the commissioner of police in Hong Kong, care of police headquarters, Hong Kong. That's it. I didn't even know the correct address. About 2 months later, I got a reply, not from the commissioner of police, but from the head of the police training school in Hong Kong. And she was a Scottish lady. She died a few years ago, very famous lady. But she wrote to me, thanking me for my interests, and said they cannot recruit directly to the Hong Kong police. We need to go through the Crown agent, the Crown agents in London.
Oh.
So contact the Crown agents, and so I copied that, got the letter, and I wrote another letter to the Crown agents and sent a letter down there. And they replied to me all by letter. No internet, of course, no mobile phones. At that time, I'm in my Hangka, which is a very remote area in Scotland. Right, so I'm staying there in the meantime. And anyway, they gave me a pass to travel to London for an interview. And to cut a long story short, after after 2 interviews, I was accepted to join. At that time it was 1973.
How old were you at the time?
73, I'll be 21.
Wow. Very courageous boy.
No, it was, the reason I left was because this adventure.
Yeah, adventurous.
It was a very, very good decision or advice from my Chinese friend, because how boring it would be to be a policeman, as we say, shaking door handles in the city in Scotland,
Of course.
and to come to Hong Kong and have such a wonderful, exciting, adventurous life in Hong Kong.
And find a wife too.
Yes.
So, but back to Scotland for a second. What kind of Scot are you? A Highlander or Lowlander?
Highlander.
Highlanders. How remote was the area?
Oh, at that time, the family is staying in the Hebrides, in the Outer Hebrides.
Oh wow, those are islands above Scotland.
It's the west, it's a chain of islands to the far west of Scotland.
Yeah, so that's even more remote.
Yes, to get there, you have to go by boat. It's quite a long journey, even from Scotland.
Yeah.
Well, but actually, you say it is actually, I agree with you. It's very adventurous to come all the way to Asia, especially Hong Kong. But then you didn't come in the right time. You know why? Because the ICAC is just around the corner.
Oh.
You're not making any money.
No, I don't agree. In fact, it was the right time.
Oh, okay.
I had no idea about what was going on in Hong Kong at that time with the ICAC and the corruption issues. I had no idea. I only saw visions of nice photographs of policemen on motorbikes and
Still see what?
nice uniform, and Hong Kong, amazing city. So the idea of being a policeman in such an amazing international city was a big draw. So I had no idea about this corruption issue.
You didn't know that some
No.
police officers are making huge amount of money.
To me, it would have been abhorrent, because my upbringing was very, can I say, very Christian, very
Honest.
honesty, and at that time I was, I wouldn't say naive, but I still had these very strong ideals. The idea of a policeman was to protect, and the thought of a policeman being corrupt to me was abhorrent.
Wow, if that is the case, if there's no ICAC with your personality, you won't even fit in. You will not agree to it.
No, but even then I didn't fit in when we arrived, because I found out within a few months that some of my fellow recruits, right, we were part of the first new recruitment after the forming of the ICAC. And some of us were from Canada, ex-RCMP. Some of my fellow inmates were recruits were from Australia, and from other countries. A few from UK, some ex-police from UK. But we were chosen to put new blood into the police force.
The new blood after the ICAC.
And not only my group, but then from then on.
No wonder you're so good.
No, I'm not so good because
you're
I'm
good at-
righteous.
You are righteous. You
No.
can really perform work. Okay, can I ask you about? Do you know Taffy Hunt? Do you know what's his name?
Copper?
Derek Barry.
Derek Bear was
Are they before you?
no, Derek Bear was, in fact, when I went to homicide in 1976. Derek Bear was the chief inspector. in
So they were
homicide.
in Hong Kong before the establishment of the ICAC.
Yes, a long time before.
I see. So you are a police officer after the establishment of the ICAC, but these were the people that were before the ICAC.
yes,
So if we put a line there, so they
Yeah.
are the old people, you are the new people.
Yes, but you couldn't draw a real strict line, because many of these older people, they carried on for many years after
Sure.
the establishment of the ICAC. You can't turn a police force, which is quite a high percentage of corrupt officers, into a squeaky clean police force like that.
Yeah, sure.
Even with the ICAC and all their powers, it takes time. And in the case of Hong Kong police, it probably took about 10 years to get rid of the bulk of the corrupt officers and change the culture of the police force. Anyway, at that time I was a young recruit. I had no idea of all these things, except when I was in police force, the commandant of the police training school was arrested.
Oh. You're actually seeing a lot of people getting arrested.
Yes, and then we were shocked. The commandant of our training school, he was arrested by the ICAC, and he was what they call the bagman for corporate.
Oh.
But
the
yes,
bag means the bag, the carrying of the money
they
bag.
call him the bagman, the man who's fixing all the corrupt money and probably laundering it and paying out who's to get what. So he was arrested. There were several other arrests around that time when I was in training school. And when I was left training school, I was posted first of all to Bayview. And in Bayview was a nest egg of the old station sergeants, who were still there, but they were getting ready to flee to Taiwan. I didn't know, but some of the famous station sergeants were there. So I was right in the thick of it. And even one of the superintendents who had been seconded, because when ICAC was formed, some of the original persons in that were transferred from the police into the ICAC. And some of them were arrested while they were in the ICAC. And there was all kinds of things going on. It was very, very strange. And I thought at one time, what kind of police force have I joined?
Yeah, I was wondering.
It's being arrested.
Yeah, this is embarrassing.
It's embarrassing, and there's a young bombanzai, as they call it, in Bayview. There were people being arrested almost every day. I thought, my God, what's going on? What have I joined?
Everybody one by one. But were there a pardon? How did the pardon work? Was that a whole bunch of police officers were like trying to crash into the ICAC office? And then there was a pardon from the governor. And how does that pardon work? So you need to come clean and you get pardoned, or everybody got pardoned?
That was a year or two after I was out of training school. This kind of very tense situation carried on for a couple of years. The ICAC had just been formed. There was a lot of arrests. And it came to a point where the police force in general were getting a bit, whether they were corrupt or not corrupt, they were getting a bit fed up being under siege all the time. At the same time, they were still required to do their duty to Hong Kong, in the streets, and to the people of Hong Kong. So there's this dichotomy of, okay, we're a police force under siege, everyone thinks we're all corrupt, but they weren't all corrupt. It would have been impossible for them all to be corrupt, otherwise the police force wouldn't function in general. I believe at one time there was a catchphrase was that Hong Kong police was the best police force that money could buy. There's probably a lot of truth in that. It was I could see it was a very good police force, but it was a hard job getting rid of the corrupt culture, which was pretty strong. Anyway, my group, my intake, the probationary inspector, PI 78, I think we were. Was it 81? I can't remember. Anyway, the squads surrounding us, the intake, and a few years after us, they were all new blood. So we were regarded by the incumbents, whether they'd been arrested or not, but they all thought they were going to be arrested the next day. They all thought that we were spies. So we were never approached to try and corrupt us.
Sure.
Or get us into their gang, their group. We were never approached. The only approach I had in all my years was a station sergeant when I was posted to North Point, who I didn't even know, but he was one of the corrupt station sergeants who eventually fled to Taiwan, presented me with a silver pen. It was a solid silver pen with my name inscribed in it. And I thought, what's this for? Oh, this is for you. Die low. My elder brother was just a young young man. He was the elder brother, but I thought this is very strange. So I didn't want to go. I knew it was an attempt to corrupt me.
Maybe he
So-
thought you're the spy, so better give you something so you don't spy on him.
Maybe, but
Trying to get him dirty.
yeah, he was trying to
Dirty.
get this. He was trying to compromise me in a
Yes.
way.
Yeah.
Do you take it?
Yes, I took it.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was polite.
You better take it. You don't take it,
I
yeah.
can't say it would be very rude of me. And I'm talking about general life,
Of
not
course.
in this sense where someone gives you a gift like that. But I knew
That's
that
right.
he was the station sergeant. I was in a bomb band. That
He's higher than you.
No, he's not.
He's not?
I'm technically
You're
higher
higher
than
than
him.
him. Okay.
But why is he giving me gifts? He doesn't even work with me. So I thought very hard because I was aware of all these things going on. Well, of course, I wasn't stupid, although I was pretty naive at that time. So I thought, well, how am I going to handle this? So I didn't tell any of my fellow bomb bands because it was difficult to trust people in these days. So I went to the superintendent in charge of the district, the division, and asked for an interview. And was interviewed, and I told him the story. I said, "Here's the pen. I don't want it. I want to be left alone to do my work. I don't want." But at the same time, I don't want to kick up a ruckus and go direct to ICAC. So I went to my senior, chap, and I wasn't bothered again.
Oh.
I wasn't bothered again, but he eventually, that particular station sergeant, fled to Taiwan. He's one of the famous group that fled to Taiwan.
How about that superintendent? Did he ever get in trouble, or he was clean?
He was never, he was eventually promoted to a very senior
Okay.
rank. How he handled it, I don't know. We never spoke about it again, but I was never bothered again.
Okay.
And throughout my career, which was quite a long career in the police, I was never approached. No one ever tried to.
That was the one
correct.
time. That was the one off. That's the one time.
Yeah, I think it was a test.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's a test.
It's a test.
But
So,
the information must have gone through the station because you never got approached again.
Never approached. But I had a very good friend of mine, who's still a very, very good friend, who was working in the same station as me. And he told me in confidence that he'd found that the infamous brown envelope in his desk drawer. There was some money in it. It was round about Christmas, and he had a couple of kids. And we weren't paid. We were not highly paid in these days. And he asked me, "Norrie, what should I do?" And I said, "Look, you can take it, right? But I'll tell you this, and this is something I meant, and we still talk about this to this day. If you take it, you're not your own man. You're owned by these people for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Whether it's $10 or $10,000, if you take that money,
Yes.
right, you don't know why, you don't know where it's from, some syndicate operating drugs or this and that. They're not giving you it for nothing because they love you. They're giving you it because you've been compromised and you're then owned by them.
Yes.
So if you want to be your own man, then don't take it. You can take it out of your drawer and give it to, we had in these days, it was Bomban and CID at the time. We had the JI, as we called it. It was called a junior investigator, but it's actually your right-hand man, doing a lot of tasks for you, morning reports and things of that nature. Very, very useful man. So I said, give it to your JI and say, I don't want to see anything like this ever again.
Yeah.
And or you can go down to ICAC and give it to them and hand it over to them. It's your decision.
Now, if a cop
But
went,
he never took it.
he never took it
so you leave it in the drawer for forever. You left it still there?
No, he gave it
to his supervisor.
To the supervisor.
not to his
The
supervisor,
GI.
to his GI, his
The GI.
assistant.
Okay, he gave it. Okay,
His-
so
his-
got rid
Gave it
of.
to him. Said, I don't know what's inside, but I don't want ever to see anything like that again. And that's it. And he was never approached again.
That's good.
And this is still a good friend of yours.
Yes, yes.
Great. So what's the difference of giving it to the JI or going to the ICAC? Are you looked at differently?
Well, Probably, if going to ICAC, it would be a huge investigation, there'll be interviews, there'll be this and that, the whole station will be ready, and all the rest of it. No.
You don't do this to your people.
So the other police officers would look at someone going to ICAC as
Yeah, at that time, that was the culture. But as I said, we can't be black and white about it. The police force had to function.
Mm-hmm.
And government knew that, the chief of police knew that. But they still, at the same time, they knew it had to be cleaned up. It was a painful process. So you could do it in the way that I suggested, but it was up to his choice. If he had gone to ICAC, as I say, there would have been huge disruption and all the rest of it. Lots of interviews, or if he did it that way, in a quieter way, it's a warning to these people, don't ever approach me again. Right? I'm not one of yours, I don't want to be one of yours. Right? I'm my own man, you're not going to own me.
Yeah.
So internally dealt with the supervisor is actually the better way.
It depends. It's really depends. Not always.
But you will be labeled as a rat if you
Go to the ICAC.
Exactly.
I was probably labelled as a rat by going to the chief superintendent.
But a smaller rat.
Well, maybe, you're right. Maybe a mouse
A mouse.
or a mole.
A big rat, a big target, everybody will come after you.
But anyway, it achieved a purpose because I was never bothered again. And, my friend was never bothered again.
Do you personally know Gorber? Do you know Taft Hunt? You never met them?
I never met them.
Because they were actually on the way out to the prison.
Well, Gorba, I think he'd already fled. Taft Hunt was still around in, I think, one side police station for not long after I arrived, but I never actually met him.
Okay, you took over the Star House case from once his file. It was once his case.
That was years later.
Years later, yeah, that's true.
When it was a so-called cold case.
How about Barry? Have you ever met him?
Barry?
Jerry Barry, the
Taffy
cardboard,
Bear, so-called.
The cardboard murder case, the so-called how do you call that? That's the name of the very
Kojak?
Kojak, the Kojak.
黃哨松譚.
光頭神探係光頭神探. You met him?
Yeah, he was in, when I went to Homicide Bureau in 1976, he was a chief inspector in Homicide Bureau.
So I was actually doing a big research on him. He will say he is a Santam, Kojak, but I see all of the cases, at least I think more than half of the cases he was handling was not actually solved.
No.
It's going everywhere.
No. He was, when he was we were in Homicide together, I was just a young bomber. He was the chief inspector. He attracted publicity because of his looks. And he liked publicity. But he had no background in criminal investigation. He was a uniform branch officer, so I could know, why is this man in Homicide Bureau as the chief inspector? But years later, there's a logical reason for that. For some very corrupt, I'm not saying he's corrupt, he was never charged, etc. But he was a big friend of Taffy Hunt, because they were both watchmen. There was a kind of policy in these days, if someone was being outrageously corrupt, you put them someplace where they couldn't earn any money. The homicide is not a place for corrupt officers. There's no opportunity to earn money there.
No one to shake down.
No one to shake down. Like in a district, there would be some gambling dens here or there, and this and that. But in Homicide bureaus,
Dead bodies.
Yes. So it's not a place for corrupt officers. So they put there to keep them out of trouble, stop them from getting their sticky fingers in places where they shouldn't be. And so in Homicide Bureau, that's a theory that maybe he was put there. I'm not saying he was corrupt, but anyway, why did you mention Patrick then?
Because, seriously, I don't like him. And I believe he has wrongfully accused 𝑳𝘪𝘬𝘦𝘯𝘵 Kearl, the so-called murderer, which I have actually encountered. And so he maintained his innocence all the way to his end. And also, recently I have been doing some research on Barry and find out that he's kind of connected with the Nazi association. He is very fond of Hitler. So, and I also recently found out that his estate was being auctioned. He was selling, his wife maybe, selling pots and pans of the estates, and I'm actually looking into him.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so
Didn't he end up with Taffy Hunt in Spain?
Yes, he ended up with Taffy Hunt in Spain. They got a villa next to each other.
Oh,
They retire, all of them retire in Spain, and I have also got hold of a book that was written by Taffy Hunt of bragging how he was corrupted and how he got above the law and how he's just in prison for a very short while. So I did a lot of detailed research on the cases, including one, I think 13-year-old baby girl, very young girl that was raped and brutally murdered, handled by Barry, who came out and do a lot of publicity in front of the camera, photo shooting, but at the end, nothing. He didn't solve the case. He's a big talker. That's how I think about him. I don't like him.
Well, you certainly know more about him than I did, but I knew he was a friend of Taff Hunt. That's kind of common knowledge. And I knew he was a sympathizer with Nazi ideas. I mean, he told me himself. I found that quite abhorrent, but anyway. I didn't work that closely with him. I'm not trying to distance myself from it. Homicide Bureau was quite a small group, but he was the chief inspector. As far as the body in the box is the case you're talking about, that's the case that he got the most publicity about. They found that the tram stop in Happy Valley, just outside the ice cream shop. That was 17th of December 1974. There's a memory. So,
Yeah, you're right.
yes. So I can't comment on the allegations about that 𝑳𝘪𝘬𝘦𝘯𝘵 was set up or whatever. I don't know. I've got no real details about the case. I know the case quite well. I was never involved in that case as a police officer. It was Taffy Bear's case. It was made famous because, not particularly because of him, but because of the forensic evidence.
They said this was Hong Kong's first forensic case.
It wasn't the first, but it was quite a breakthrough in terms of forensic evidence. I think I've said many times in these interviews that the forensic department of the was really the highest regard for the forensic scientists. They were a branch of the government chemist department. But, there was some forensic evidence which would be called contact evidence.
Yes, but the thing is this, he never wore the so-called jacket that was allegedly worn by the murderer at the murder time. So there are many, many pieces of evidence pointing to this guy being framed. He wanted to solve the case so badly, so quickly, that he might have framed him. And his personality, there are doubts about his personality. Who on earth would be the big fans of Hitler? You know, Hitler, they are like racism, this Chinese man, this yellow boy, so frame him.
I can't comment on whether these allegations are true or not. It would be wrong of me to do so because I have no evidence that he was framed.
Sure.
About a year before this case, there was the McLean case.
Yeah.
Where the evidence, I think this is your first forensic evidence case, 1973, or
in Chung Hung Kok, the officer at that time was 𝑦𝘪𝘬𝘦.
Oh, he ended up being quite well known ICAC. He went to ICAC.
Yeah, 𝑦𝘪𝘬𝘦 went to ICAC, the big rat. Yeah, he was a police officer that framed Mr. Chen, and he then went to work for the ICAC. Did he arrest anybody after he gone there?
I don't know.
he had a bad reputation.
Yes.
In the 1960s, I was doing research on something else. There was a protest regarding the East China Islands being brought back to the mainland. There was a protest out there by a lot of students, and I think he was leading the riot team to contain these guys. And a student would later report that he was pulled into a van and he started beating the Chinese student. And the student said, "I'm going to report you." And he said, "Go ahead. I'll just tell him self-defense," and continue beating him up. So he is then this guy who charges Mr. Chan in the McLean case, 1973. And it's in the newspapers. They said, how did you know it was this guy? And he basically said, I was driving past and I just had a gut feeling. It's him. I was like, what? What kind of police work is this?
I can't comment on these cases because I wasn't involved. I have no direct knowledge of it.
So anyway, so now I know at least ICAC is established. So they want to clean the police force by recruiting good people in. And you are the people who are after the ICAC. And there were people that were before the ICAC that worked on a different, system. So gradually they clean it up. So that's why you're so good. Because all the audience are saying, why on earth were there, police officers like you?
But there was
hardworking,
there were many police officers like
that
me.
like good as you.
Yes.
Give me some examples.
All of my colleagues.
All of your colleagues.
All of my friends.
Like Li Baofu?
Li Baofu, he was outstanding. Yeah.
Li Baofu, he was an expert of the Hong Kong tribe. And then you have a lot of Chinese officers that work with you. They were very good officers.
They're still good friends to these days. Li Baofu sadly has passed away. 𝑳𝘪𝘬𝘦𝘯𝘵 was a sergeant, a station sergeant with me for many, many years. Wonderful. And I could name dozens of them.
Are they more Chinese than
all Chinese?
All Chinese.
The people I'm in contact most with since leaving the police station are Chinese. In many times I was the only Guaido in the groups that I was working in.
So they have trained a lot of good Chinese policemen after the ICAC.
And even there was many, but some of them were before the ICAC. They were still very uncorrupt. As I said, the police force wasn't totally corrupt.
That's true.
Some very, very good police. Otherwise, it would have been a disaster.
I know one person that was before, and he's not corrupted. He's Lei Lok-Fu, Charlie Lee.
Charlie Lee, he's very famous.
Yeah, he was my uncle.
I was surprised when before you told me that.
Yeah, he was seriously investigated by the ICAC.
Yes,
home was raided, and my mother had business with him at that time, and our home was raided. But then ICAC officially produced a letter of apology.
Oh.
So he was actually investigated, and he was not a corrupted officer. Very rarely, right?
No.
But he was very, very high up. He was what, superintendent?
Yes, he was very famous. Even me as a young bomban, his name was well known. He was very well respected.
The $7 million robbery and a lot of cases.
Yes, a lot of cases. He was a very famous detective, a real detective.
He was actually a Kuomintang officer in those days.
Really?
They were fighting the Japanese at the time. I think he's way older than you.
Yes, of
one
course.
Generation up,
he was already very well known, very famous, and coming up for retirement when I joined the police force.
So there were good people.
There are many good people. But there were very turbulent days when ICAC was formed because there was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of overzealousness on the part of the ICAC. Some of them were young people with no police experience, young graduates, and another group was some that were recruited from the UK, and some very well known to some of our ex-UK policemen who told me that some individuals had come to join the ICAC because they were fleeing from trying to escape Operation Countryman, which was the anti-corruption operation in the United Kingdom, which is a very big operation. And to escape from that, they came and joined the ICAC. And I remember a confrontation between one of my very close friends and close colleague at the time, who met his former boss who had joined the ICAC in a place in Hong Kong. Actually, in front of me, publicly accused him of being corrupt. When he was in the police force together, accused them of being corrupt and a hypocrite for joining the ICAC and pretending to be a righteous police officer. So there was these sort of things going on. So there was a lot of friction. I worked with the ICAC on certain cases, but I wasn't very comfortable working with them. Not because of it's difficult to explain, but I didn't like their methods. I didn't like. I just didn't like the way they operated.
I understand.
It's not that I was against them. They were my saviors in a sense.
Yeah, well, I've done a lot of cases with them as well as a lawyer, so I understand what you're saying.
I didn't like the way they operated.
I know what you mean.
They developed their own culture, which was not always the best culture.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So do you work as a police officer until you retire, or do you? So you work all the way until retirement?
I only retired about a year ago.
I mean, what? You're still a police?
No. As a police officer, I left 96.
96, so quite a long time. It's like 20, 30 years?
Yeah, I've been out of the police force longer now than I was in the police force. So I was 23 years in the police force.
Yeah, and then you retire almost like 60?
No, I didn't retire.
Oh, you didn't retire?
In a sense, yes, because in these days, on the run-up to the handover in 1997, a few years before, they developed a system of giving us a choice to leave the police force if we didn't want to carry on in
Hong Kong.
the new regime, or we could stay. And if we left, they would give us quite a good financial package. Plus, depending on how much of the financial package we took, there would be a decrease in the pension going forward. So, for whatever reason, I left. But prior to leaving, I already graduated in law, and I'd already become a member of Gray's Inn. I'd graduated as a barrister at the Inns of Court School of Law in London. I did this in my own time, with my own money. And I'd accumulated quite a lot of leave by 1994. And I needed a year's leave, a year at the Inns of Court School of Law in London to graduate as a barrister. So I applied to police headquarters to take that leave. It's very unusual to get such a long leave, but I've been denied leave so long, because of court cases. I was always in court, so I'd accumulated quite a lot of leave. We're not usually allowed to accumulate such a long leave. And so I had to get special permission to take this and then use it to go to London and take the bar, as they call it in London. So I was already qualified as a barrister 2 years before I left the police force.
I see.
So when I left the police force, I'd secured pupillage in chambers in England. So I practiced as a barrister almost right away. So I didn't retire.
So how many years after you become a barrister, then you moved to be? I know you have a investigation department. I mean, how do you call private eye detective agency?
Security firm?
No, I was never in security. But in 2005, I was offered an opportunity to come back to Asia. I was never really comfortable in the UK. I was preferred to be in Asia. And I didn't fit in the UK. As a barrister, I was very successful. Within 2 years, I was engaged for murder cases. Without a QC, without a leader, on my own. So I was doing pretty well as a barrister, but in terms of living in the UK, I felt like an outsider. I'd been away since I was 16.
You don't like the food, or what don't you like?
I'd been in Asia since 1968, and that was 1997.
Okay.
That's a long time, and I was right in Middle England, surrounded by English culture. No, it wasn't for me.
You were Chinese, forget it. You're already
I was
Chinese.
desperate to get back to China in some form. So I was lucky enough to be engaged by the Channel Islands government to do an investigation into the Venetian at that time in Las Vegas. They were applying for a license in the Channel Islands to do some kind of online gambling. So I was commissioned by the commission, the so-called gambling commission, to do an investigation to see if there were the due diligence investigation. So I was there for quite a few months. And my main contact there was the general counsel of Venetian, and we worked quite closely together. And so he was sent over to Macau to open the Sands Casino in Macau. And when he was there, he contacted me and asked me if I was interested in joining his department, legal department there, and setting up an internal investigation department. It had already been set up, but he wanted someone younger to come and take over from the incumbent head of the investigation department and kind of modernize it. So I jumped at the chance. I said, "Oh yes, thank you very much." So that was me back in Macau, 2005.
That's how you ended up in Macau.
And I've been here ever since. So I was back home in a sense to Hong Kong, in Macau. So I was happy.
So you're practically a Hong Kong and Macau citizen, both?
Yes, but more Macau nowadays. I don't often go to Hong Kong. It's too fast for me now.
Yeah, same here. Same here. Macau is way easier for living.
Let me jump back to your career. I know you got injured, and we're not going to talk about that. And you mentioned in one of our shows you were in the hospital.
Okay, let me tell you.
wait.
He's very curious. He saw you have a scar, and he's like imagining things.
No.
And he told me.
That's not where I'm going with this.
I'm going to tell what you told me.
What?
He think you've been, hang up and tortured.
No.
Okay, all right. So that's not where I was going with this. But I know you got injured at one point. So, because my main question is, at any point in your career, did you say, I don't want to be a policeman anymore?
No.
So even when things went bad for you, you always wanted to be a policeman?
I can tell you without any exaggeration, the best years of my life was when I was a police officer in Hong Kong.
Okay.
I've never experienced anything which could come anywhere near so satisfying, so enjoyable.
Okay.
Which as simple as that.
So you hit gold when you became a policeman.
Don't say that.
Oh, sorry. Basically, your life was fulfilled, very fulfilling, by being a policeman.
Well, I can tell you, when I was in police training school, I was no star. I was struggling. I don't think my instructor in police training school thought I was going to pass the test. But really, it was when I got out into street work and into CID and criminal investigation in particular that I found my niche, which was amazing. I was so happy. And we worked so hard in these days. But we had a lot of fun. We had good camaraderie. We were like a family with our team. As a young man, you had a team.
Sure.
A team of detectives, and we knew nothing. At 21, 22 years old, nothing. The sergeants and the constables, they knew 10 times more than you do. And if you had a good sergeant, a good station sergeant who liked you, he would guide you along and teach you all the best things and make you into a good officer. And I'm continually grateful for the so-called rank and file. Well, I'm still in contact to this day.
You were always in contact with all the good friends. You're very long, in Chinese you call that long-term affection, long-term true grit.
I was so much to be thankful to them for. Yes, a lot of respect.
So what about that scar? Is that a secret?
No, it's nothing.
He's imagining things. He says
She's going overboard.
No, you
That's
said,
great.
he thinks you can't talk about that scar.
No, there's nothing
What is
else.
it? What is it? What is it?
It was an injury to my arm, that's all.
Is no one hanging up and torture you?
I'm not that brave. I would have given up. So anyway, so it's a simple fact that it was the best years of my life. When I became a barrister, I enjoyed the work. In fact, I became strangely, I enjoyed defending more than prosecuting.
You told me you were on some murder cases.
Yes, and quite a few so-called trial cases.
What about that murder case? Did he really kill someone?
No, this was in fact, it was quite a well-known case because it was the largest group in English common law history, which is pretty long. Largest, I think it was over 20 defendants.
Oh.
I had defended number 12. The largest group had been charged with murder in the history of
England.
The murder of one person.
Wow.
In the history of English common law. In fact, when we were doing the committal proceedings, it was a long committal proceedings to commit them to the trial, to a semi-trial to commit them to the High Court for jury.
How did 20 people come to kill one person?
It was a trial gang fight. They'd had a dispute in Chinatown in London.
Oh.
And one person had fled, a pretty minor fight, and he'd fled in a car. But the trials are pretty good at calling up so-called reinforcements, and they ended up in a car chase all the way up to, let me remember the name of the town in the East Coast. It was about like a 30-mile drive, and all the way they were fighting and stopping and fighting with machetes, and eventually they caught up with this one person in Colchester, near to the police station, and killed him, chopped him to pieces.
All Chinese?
They're all Chinese. Most of them are illegal immigrants. My client was defendant number 12. and
what did he get?
He was a legal immigrant, and there was a catch to this. And there was a lot of discussion about the trial because you can imagine 20 defendants. There would be 20 QCs. Normally in a murder case, there's the Queen's Counsel, and the Queen Counsel would be leading a barrister, right?
Yeah.
And then there would be solicitors, the solicitor's clerk. So there wasn't a courthouse in the whole of the UK that could hold a trial like that, or even the committal. In the committal proceedings, they would bring us in batches, right? Defendants 1 to 6, and then 7 to 12, and then the blah blah blah. But what about the trial? And then there would be the press. And so they eventually decided they were going to go to Braintree and use an ex-RAF Royal Air Force hangar.
Oh, okay.
And convert that into a courtroom for the trial. So it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And anyway, we had an argument during the committee about bail. And the judge who was hearing bail applications, of course in English law it's a presumption for bail. So you're presumed to be able to get bail unless
and that's not.
You can argue reasons why he shouldn't get bail. So the judge had made a proclamation that anyone under 21, any of the defendants who were over 21, don't even bother to apply for bail, right? Because I'm not going to grant it. Now, I think there was only 2 defendants amongst the group of 20 who were under 21. So that means 18 of the defendants, he was telling the lawyers, including me, don't even apply for bail. Now that in itself is unlawful.
Unlawful,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah, I was thinking, what's going on?
Yeah.
So I got suspicions about enemy because I was saying that they were all of them were illegal immigrants. At that time, and I'd done a lot of research on it when I was doing my master's degree in Exeter. 25% of the Chinese in the UK at the time were technically illegal immigrants. So there was a large percentage. And there wasn't much enforcement at the time. So we all trundled up to apply for bail, and we were denied bail, so we went and appealed to the High Court, and the High Court says give them bail. The moment they got bail, they all fled.
Oh.
All of them fled. So there was
familiar.
There was no trial.
Sounds familiar.
So there was no trial?
No.
Because how was sentenced in 𝑪𝘩𝘮𝘦?
Well,
No.
because who were these people? Was that their real name? They all had false travel documents. Most of them ended up in Amsterdam
Just across the channel.
as illegal immigrants there.
Okay.
So there was no trial.
Wow, this case is so familiar.
Yeah.
I remember I got a friend. He's a barrister, and he was on a similar case dealing with illegal immigrants. He got them bail, and all of them fled.
Yeah, of course.
And he got into trouble being the handling solicitor or barrister. Ah.
Yeah,
Wow.
so, and we didn't know they would flee. They could have easily put restrictions on them. But anyway, they all fled.
Wow.
So there was no trial. So I missed out on my first murder trial, but I was involved in the committal.
Well, that's really interesting.
And with 20 defendants, when we get the papers to study, to make our applications during the committal, we get not only the papers or the interview evidence referring to our own client, but the evidence of all the other clients.
So you're buried under bundles there.
Yeah.
The papers were delivered to my home in England in a truck.
Yeah.
Now I went.
Wow. Wow.
So I was up to 4 or 5 in the morning every night going through all these papers to cross-reference, is there anything that could help my client?
Yeah.
So it was quite an interesting case.
It sounds like it. Oh, wow, this is really, you have lots of stories and really like to talk to you. So it's like really fun.
So anyway.
Did I miss anything?
Well,
Everyone is asking me about whatever that. So I know you have an important meeting tomorrow because your daughter
Yes.
is having a competition,
Yes.
dancing competition.
Yes.
So, well, but I will be seeing you quite a lot in
Really?
Macau. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, really. You were looking so scared. Why you look so scared? Come on, Norman. Well, you should be scared of him. He can't even pronounce your name. I know you guys are good friends. He's
No.
like, yeah.
One thing is you always refer to me as chief inspector.
yes, but you're actually higher than that.
No, during some of these cases I was a bomb ban.
Okay.
Sometimes I was the chief inspector,
Uh-huh.
but when I left the place I was a senior superintendent.
Senior superintendent.
It doesn't matter to me. I'm quite happy to be called the chief inspector. The reason being, because, as I said, my happiest years was as a police officer in Hong Kong. But my happiest years as a police officer was as a chief inspector.
Okay. All right.
Because I'm not involved as a superintendent in the politics of things. I'm still on the ground. I can still get my hands onto a case. I don't just supervise my chief inspector and let him get on with it, as I did when I became a superintendent.
So you're
So
in the trenches.
Right in the thick of it.
Yeah.
At the same time, you have a degree of, higher degree of responsibility, so you're actually in charge of the case.
Yeah.
Of course, you report to the superintendent, but at that time I'd accumulated quite a lot of experience, so I would report to the superintendent, yes, tell him what's going on, but I would just ask him for support if I needed extra manpower or we needed overtime payments. Otherwise, leave me alone.
Yeah.
So these were really, really interesting days as the chief inspector. So you can keep on calling me that.
Yes, sir. Chief inspector.
Calling you my kind of.
All right. I'm just gonna keep it at chief inspector or Nori. Okay. Yeah.
All right, so I'll call it a day then.
Yeah.
Then,
You see what your fans say, what they come back with.
Exactly.
Maybe they'll have some questions, and maybe we'll get back together and answer.
Yeah, and they really want to meet you in person as well. They want to have your autographs, some pictures taken. So maybe.
Oh, no, I don't want. I'm really very low key.
I know, but everybody know where you go for coffee every morning. You know, it's not a secret anymore.
Well,
Really?
it's half a secret.
Well, but only for Macau people who are very, very good. So anyway, so let's.
I'm saying don't announce it, okay?
I'm not going
That's
to
what I
announce
mean.
it. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to keep that secret.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, we'll see you next time then. Thank
Okay.
you for watching, and there's an important message at the back. If you like this program, you
Oh, please go ahead, subscribe, like, share, thumbs up,
comment.
and comment.